What if I told you there's a world out there with the most beautiful gleaming colors? A world full of mesmerizing treasures, where you find joy and purity and abundance. What if I told you that you could find an endless universe within yourself? Are you ready for a journey? Then come with us and discover the colors of the universe. Welcome everyone to another episode of The Colors of the Universe here on KMPQ Ascension Radio. I'm your host, Evie, and my guest today is Carol Mae Whittick, a very interesting guest with lots of talents and lots of projects. And yeah, Carol, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. First, thank you for inviting me on. This is going to be fun. And my name's Carol Mae Whittick. I'm from the UK, and I am currently, I suppose, my main project is my podcast, Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening, which is higher energetic resonance, which is a kind of an acronym of it. It's something I launched about 5 years ago. And even when I initially launched it, it's called Tools for the Awakening, but it was kind of started off being Tools for the Awakening Woman. And then I really kind of shifted the focus of it to be Tools for the Awakening in 2020, when I saw the world was like really tipping into that space. And I also opened it up so I wasn't just speaking to women, because at that point I just wanted to speak to people who recognize the awakening. And it's interesting because I wrote an intro to the podcast that I kind of like introduce every episode, and it was just pretty much relevant that I wrote it 5 years ago, and it's just as relevant today. It's all about speaking to people that are helping humanity awaken, that people awaken. So I've been doing that, and then also when we went into lockdown in 2020, because a lot of the work that I was doing was outside, and like everyone else, suddenly I had to stay at home all the time. I had all this spare time. I just started digging around online, and I connected with a platform that's based in the US called the Great Awakening Report. So I've been working with them for 2.5 years as well. So that's been a great synergy between me doing my own podcast and me doing a podcast with them as well. So it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the other podcast too, the Great Awakening or the Greater Awakening.
Great Awakening Report. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did not fully understand what this is all about when I saw the page. Can you explain it a little bit, this project?
Yeah, so it was started, the managing editor started it probably around about the same time that I started my podcast. So obviously we didn't know each other then, we were kind of doing our own thing. And it's a report that encompasses everything that's happening during that week, because we do pretty much a weekly report. So since I've collaborated with them from, I think April 2020 was the first one, we've literally just put one out every week. So we're up to about episode, I think 122, 123. And what it is, it kind of looks at different aspects of what's happening during the awakening. So we'll have kind of areas of like intelligence, which is, we, as the majority of us, even though we're seeking, we don't 100% know what's going on. We have some ideas. There are voices out there on the alternative scene that are kind of telling us that this is happening at that level, but also there's a kind of like things that are happening super behind the scenes. So intelligence really looks at, those things that we can't necessarily verify, but we kind of look around and see, is there any evidence of these things happening? We've got like hot topics. It then moves into, you've got some political, like kind of just like would I'd say just kind of look at what the political stance is, really, without taking any sides, but just kind of like reporting on it. It's a report, so we just kind of put the information out there. We look at geophysical, so there's a lot of changes in the weather across the world that we don't necessarily really get reported on. I think for most people, weather is it raining outside or not? How's it going to affect you? We've got a part that looks at mockingbird media programming, satanic corruption and trafficking, global awakening documentaries, and then as it progresses it goes into history, cosmic history, hidden truths in terms of like space, UFOs, that kind of thing. And then then it kind of goes to spirituality and path of awakening. So it covers everything really. It's a real kind of full report, and it's great to just do it because I've learned so much. It's really deepened my research and my aspect to be working with someone who I thought I was down the rabbit hole, but someone who's been down the rabbit hole like 20 years longer than I have. So, there's so much to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the page looked really interesting and full of information. Like you really need to take some time to look at it because it's really compressed. Is that the word compressed? And so what is the internet address for people who are curious?
Yeah, greatawakeningreport.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And your other podcast, though, is also really interesting. And you have so many different guests and so many different topics, but in the end, it's like, it's still one topic like a better life or a healthy life. And I think it's super interesting, the guests you're having on there. And but you're also a musician.
Yes. As well. I know. I forget sometimes as well, because it's been so long that I've actually performed. I kind of perform in my house and in my head. But I remember that I am a performer because the theme tune to my podcast is actually, I recorded it like in my bedroom. So I'm like, I remember I used to play the piano and sing and do all that kind of stuff. So that's something that kind of just moved out of the way a little bit as well. I spent a long time as anyone who had this vision of trying to get into the music business and crack it and all that stuff. It takes up a lot of your time and a lot of your mental energy and your focus and your money and everything. You become very blinded and very focused on getting into the music industry. And but I really enjoyed what I learned from all of those years. I learned that I had a resilience to stuff, and because I got more no's than yeses. So to be able to still do it and still come out the other end, and I still don't believe that I've done what I wanted to do with the music as well. I want to get back to it, and also I think anything that I would do from this point onwards would be even realer and with less kind of less ego attached to the outcome. Because if I'm like being really honest about what I wanted at the time, I wanted to be successful, and the idea of being successful in the music industry is to be famous, right? So and so it was like, it was kind of, that was the driving force behind it. And there was a little bit of, because there was so much resistance as well, because when you're doing one thing and when you've got people around you that don't necessarily support what you're doing, they're kind of like, you're still doing this like 5, 10, 15 years later, so the impetus for you to succeed doesn't necessarily always come from a place of I love music. Even though I love music, it was like, I'm going to be so famous that you're going to be sorry that you were ever nasty to me. It's kind of got like an edge to it and an ego and everything like that. But over time, as I've I came away from that, and then looking at the way that what it would cost to actually have what I thought I wanted, I can see that I was really spared, especially after the past 2 years in particular, and really looking at people who I really admired for their talent and their music, then really understanding what it cost for them to be in that position, for people to really hear their music and for them to have that kind of influence. It isn't necessarily what it looks like. It really look like a very free life. It's like, oh my God, I'll be able to wake up and sing songs and tour and do all of this stuff. It's like, no, that's not the way it works. That's not the game you're playing at all. So you know, when I do start to perform again, it will be without wanting to be part of that at all. It just like I couldn't think of anything that would be worse than that. so it was good. And it's interesting because there was someone that I grew up with, and even though we weren't close friends, but we grew up in the same town, we were around about the same age, and she had a very public career, and you know, so you're still trying to make it, and you can see someone that you know making it in music. And there was also someone that I used to train with in athletics making it in athletics, and it was just like, oh my god, you're being taunted with the things that you were like aiming for so long. And then interestingly, when they wanted to make sure that everyone was going to take the vaccine, they used every means possible to kind of convince people to do that. And those two people then kind of came out and were very adamant that this is what we should do. And at that moment, and it really hit me, because it was like, oh my gosh, that's what it would have cost me. And, you know, like everything that I would have thought that I would have enjoyed up until that point, it wouldn't have been, the price is just too high because of what I know about, you know, what they are trying to convince people to do, whether they know about it or not. I just, you know, I will never know, because I'll never meet them. And if I did, I'd ask them how much they got paid. You know, it's amazing how life changes things. And if you just kind of sit and wait, and just you think that your time should be there, and your time is running out and what you're going to do, and then events just kind of turn it around and go like, that's the price that it costs you. And I heard someone say something earlier. I was just listening to another podcaster, and they were talking about celebrities, and they're saying, when you're making a deal with the devil will give you everything that you want, because you sell your soul. You'll get everything you want, you just won't be able to enjoy it. So you know, so you'll get all, it's like, I want all of this, I want the fame, I want everyone to love me, I want all the money, the cars, everything, and you got all of that, but you won't be able to rest. The cost will be like, yeah, you've got it, but you won't have any enjoyment with it. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing. And it's also it's been a healing thing for me actually as well, if I'm quite honest about that, because there was always like a underlying feeling of failure, you know, because I'd made such a sacrifice. I'd moved so far away from home. I'd kind of focused on everything, you know. I didn't even kind of think about relationships or children or marriage, anything like that. It was about the career. And when that didn't happen to the extent it did, I mean, I did perform and travel and all that kind of stuff, but not to the extent where anyone else would say, yeah, all you did was worth it. There was always this underlying feeling of like, man, I really messed up. What am I going to do? You know, that kind of like underlying feeling that you just can't really get rid of. And then when I really understood what that I hadn't lost anything at all, it just really lifted a weight off me. And I just had to be honest about my reasons for wanting to be there in the first place, you know. And then it kind of it was a release for me on a really profound level when I saw what that was about. Yeah,
I had a quite similar journey, since I'm also a musician, more in the direction singer-songwriter with the guitar. And but I also had the goal, oh, I need to be famous, but then when I have lots of money, I will help the whole world. And but luckily, I think, because I also had this part in me that always wanted to help the world, I think that part also got me out of this business, at least out of that part of the business that is very, that's full of sharks.
Right.
And it's not what it seems to be. And I only could take a little look behind the scenes. And when I worked for television for just a short time, but it was very intense, and the experiences I made, in the end, I was just thinking, why would anyone want to do this? Like, people are just running after something without ever getting it. You know, I met so many nice people there, but I also realized the higher the position, the less you see them, of course, and the less you see them, the less morals are there, I would say, and the more they only see you as a number. So the people who work there for, I don't know, minimum wage, they're all ambitious, and they support you, and they want the best for you, but they also have their own goals. They also want to achieve something. But then the people in higher positions that you don't get to see very often, they want good numbers.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and all of that is beside what else is going on there, you know, because that is something I think is really difficult to find or to get access to if you're not in the club, like all the satanic stuff. So I still wonder about some people that you see on TV, and they seem nice and everything. I still wonder how can they seem so nice and wonderful, and then they go to your after show party or whatnot and do satanic stuff.
I think that's part of the trick, isn't it, really, is to, like, we wouldn't be drawn to them or by their music or be their fan or whatever if they didn't seem like nice and approachable and all that kind of thing. And I think that's what's really hard for people to get their heads around, is this kind of nice persona is for the majority of the time is not necessarily who they are. You know, it's like, but they seem so nice. There's this kind of relation that people have. I put out an episode of a solo episode of my podcast this week, and I was talking about Her Majesty. I was talking about Majesty, basically. And as you know, you can see why I kind of like linked onto that. But it was about just finding your own sovereignty and finding like there's no one greater or lesser than you. And one of the phrases that I'd recently learnt about was called parasocial relationships. And it's when it's a one-sided relationship, and it's basically so many people, we all do to an extent, have parasocial relationships with our idols because we humanize them, and all we ever do is see like pictures or read something like a few seconds clip on the TV, a little interview, and then we fill in the blanks with our idea of who they are, and we just adore them, and we decide, oh, you know, they could never do that, they're a really nice person. It's like, you don't know. Like, you only know what you see when the camera's rolling on them. Like, they're always acting, like always acting, even when they're doing like behind the scenes or they're an award show or anything like that. Their job is to be that character is created for them, and they might be a completely different person, you know. So it just like, oh, they're just walking down the road having a Starbucks. It's like, no, they're a public figure, so they're doing something, you know. They're promoting Starbucks, and they've probably got a really ridiculously pair of, you know, like $1,000 trainers on that everyone's going to rush and buy. You know, there's more to it in the media than is just, there's nothing candid about anything at all now, and it's really all starting to come out, that how orchestrated these things have always been, in order to steer the mindset of generations and socially engineer people. And when I went down that level of investigation and that rabbit hole, is to really find out how the majority of stories, these rags to riches stories, were just not true. They're just not true. It didn't happen like this. These things are very, very orchestrated. And especially when you have people that have the influence of tens of millions of people. You know, the population of countries are just adoring these people and will do anything that they will say. You're not just going to let some random rags to riches person have that much power in the world just because they sing a few nice songs. It's, you know, we all have this idealistic, yeah, my songs, you know, I want to heal and help people, and no, it doesn't go it doesn't go like that. There's too much money on your back. You're generating millions and millions of pounds, like, for corporations, so you're not going to be able to just go and talk about what you want to talk about. It doesn't happen. And you know, it took a moment for me to kind of get that. It's like, no, they're not just saying nice stuff. It's no they're corporations, they're organizations in themselves.
Yeah, I had to learn that the hard way, because I always wanted to achieve that, but on the other hand, I plan to be an artist who actually talks about important things in their songs, and who risks to say something, who stands up for important things. Until I had to realize, no, you are a product that they want to sell, and you have to be a certain way.
Yeah,
you have to follow an agenda.
mm-hmm.
And but the thing is, I also noticed that I think many musicians or artists aren't forced to follow the agenda. I think they believe in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like you say, because I think what we still do is kind of put our personality in them and go, well, yeah, they kind of got tricked, you know, maybe they didn't realize what they're doing. But like you say, if you get sold an idea of a utopia or a direction that society is going into, and you're part of this insider group that is going to be wherever society is going to be, then you'll do whatever it takes to do that and to keep and to uphold it. That, or you're being blackmailed severely. You know, it's like what. But for the majority of the time, I think it's that, you know, it's a willing thing to be part of. I find it hard to believe that you could just be an innocent, especially when you get to a certain kind of stature, that you're just like, you know, you wouldn't be clueless. It wouldn't. No, people aren't that dumb. They're just not.
Yeah. How do you think this whole time did change you, like you as a musician, or your career path, or you as a person, like the past 2 years?
In many ways. I mean, even if I think about who I was at the beginning of, you know, where I was at March 2020, I was going through so much stuff, like in a personal way as well, where I'd made a decision to kind of step away from people that I wasn't in alignment with, and groups that I weren't in alignment with, that I've been connected to for a long time. So the previous 6 months before lockdown had been a kind of like lonely journey of me kind of doing some healing as I separated from that, and going through a lot of hurt and pain because of that whole kind of thing. But then as soon as like 2020 happened, like the pandemic and the lockdown started to really get pushed, for some reason everything just made sense. It was like, you know, because for years I've always kind of had an idea of the conspiracies, you know, even from very early. I've just always questioned, or things have never made sense the way that they're being presented to me. And then over time I met people who introduced me to alternative voices and like alternative comedians and alternative speakers and authors that then gave me like a parallel view, and also just kind of put a bit more weight behind my thoughts as well. So I always was, I always kind of tilted my head a little bit. And I did a little stint working years ago at the BBC. So I saw how things were manipulated from the background. And we just worked in a telephone room on a morning chat show, but we saw how we could manipulate things, or we were asked to manipulate things to make them look that certain way. I'd even done the reason I got that job is I was on a media course, and it was just a very basic course. It's not even like a highbrow qualification, like if I ever said to anyone in the UK that I did like a City and Guilds in media, they'd laugh, because it was just like the lowest kind of thing. It's not really going to open any doors for you, but it just immerses you in that. And one of the first things that I remember being tasked with was we'd just have some footage and we'd have some music, and we'd just see the many different ways that we could make different pieces of footage from that. Just, like kind of putting the music there, or changing the shots, or just putting different words on it. And when I saw that, it was like, well, what would stop the BBC doing that? And so then when I started to really look at it and had a little time when I was like in there and saw, it's like, well, nothing would stop them. Why would it stop them? Because you've got so much power when you're sitting there, when you're editing. And I used to really enjoy editing because it allowed you to kind of just make things out of scraps. You can just pull pieces together and create a narrative. So I've always kind of watched things in the certain, just squinting and the head's on the side a bit. So when all of this got announced and the majority of people really just went into it, I just went into a space of like, how is it possible? I remember standing in a queue outside a supermarket where we were all standing on these plastic spaces, these plastic dots telling us to stand like, I think, was it 6? And then, because things didn't make, I was like, well, why in some countries are you standing 2 meters apart? And why in some countries are you standing 6 feet apart? It's like, we're doing like the metric like lots of different little things didn't make sense. It felt surreal. And then watching the way that people were reacting and not questioning. And it just, and then everything that I thought I was striving to be part of, it really changed my view of London. And I eventually moved out at the end of last year as well, because I really saw that there was no soul there. There was no soul there that I was wanting to connect with, because I saw how people just went along with things that made no sense, no spiritual sense, no soul sense really, and no one was questioning on that level. They were just going along with it because we were allowed, the amount of people that I'd heard say, oh, well, we're not allowed to do that, or we can't do that. Grown people that just had no control over their own authority, that it really just kind of it really shocked me and it was, to this day, I think it will take years for us to really kind of process like exactly what went on, because it was like a living trauma every day where you're trying to explain to somebody there's no way that this can possibly be real, but they were so locked into their own trauma and their own fear and the bad behavior that it brought out from people. Like people shouting and screaming at you because you weren't wearing a mask, or you walked too close to them in the supermarket, or all of these things. It just kind of brought out a different part of people that I realized that part of me being like the outsider and always feeling that I was outside of society saved my life. And I was like, all these times that I felt like I was the outsider and I was always playing catch up and trying to get in, I'm like, I don't want to be in that. I'm glad that I'm not in that, because that doesn't look like everyone's kind of running around scared but not really knowing what they're scared of and waiting for this external. It just didn't make sense. It's like they're literally going home, sitting in front of the television, turning on the radio and waiting for this face and this voice to tell them what to do. That's not, and it just gave me more confidence in where I'd been all the time, that outsider, that person who was always listening to that strange voice in my head that was telling me to do this one thing. It's like this voice in my head and that gives me these ideas, tells me to do a podcast, tells me to go traveling, tells me to write this stuff in the middle of the night. actually has been the saving of me and has actually been the making of me, and it just gave me more confidence to speak about what I felt. And I really slowed down on the podcast, my own podcast as well, because at that point, up until that point, I'd been putting it out almost every week. And I was speaking to everyone, almost like coaches and a lot of people in the spirituality and wellness community, that when that happened, it was very clear, not to kind of say this is like a kind of gauge, but some people they were doing spiritual practices, they've been in spiritual communities for years, wellness communities, and yet they didn't have that connection to themselves to be able to discern truth. And that was highly surprising to me, because for me, I saw, I've always kind of in different spiritual practices or just readings known that there's going to be a change in the ages. There's going to be awakening. There's going to be a move to the Aquarian age or the fifth dimension or the new earth. So many people talk about this thing and we knew it was coming, but we didn't know how. And that I saw that as that it just made sense that was the time. And I was surprised that so many people that I thought were powerfully, very spiritually astute just didn't see it at all and went into fear. But it really strengthened me, gave me more conviction, because I had to really stay in my truth in the light of kind of being called all sorts of things. People would just kind of come out of the blue from Facebook that I hadn't spoken to since I'd been at school, to like kind of go like, why are you being at this super spreader protest? It's like, okay, we haven't seen each other since the 80s. Like you've like turned up to kind of tell me off. But the way that it changed me, it just gave me more confidence in knowing that voice within myself and all of that work that I've been trying to like make myself a better person, and kind of that I wasn't part of society and it didn't matter, just gave me more that this is it. You're like all these things and all these weird feelings and all you being an outsider and head in the clouds and dreamer, that's good. I've been fighting that for so long because I've been hearing how bad it was, and then now I'm like, no, all of these things, this direction that I've been having internally is saving my life and my soul potentially as well.
I had that too in the beginning, that I thought everything is surreal, and because I am also I'm somewhat used to stage settings or setups, I don't know how you call it, with costumes and everything. So it had a little bit of a theater with all the setups and grocery stores and whatnot. It was just surreal. It was like, am I in a movie? But then sometimes I had to remind myself, hey, they actually mean this in a very serious way. They think that the things they do are helpful, and I think I had to realize that how programmed people are, even in the more alternative area. I had to realize that when I started the discussion, when in general discussion started, and there was just that one topic that everyone talked about, and I did too. And I actually really, really thought that some people would realize it, and they didn't, and they still haven't. It's absolutely shocking to me, because there are so many great, smart people in this world, and who actually question a lot. And yet, for some reason, when the whole thing started in 2020, they stopped questioning. But therefore, on the other hand, other people that I would have expected to fall for it, they suddenly realized, no, this doesn't seem right to me, what the TV tells me and the politicians. So for me personally, it was a huge disappointment how many people fall for it. But on the other hand, there was this great gift that I started to talk to people that I usually would not think of talking to, and not in a bad way, but just like doesn't seem on the same wavelength. But through this whole thing, suddenly, suddenly there were many great discussions, but also many great friendships that came through all of this that I would have not expected.
Yeah.
So I guess everything has both sides, right?
Yeah. And I think I think it was almost daily there'd be like text messages, and everyone, especially at the beginning, it was like everyone was just bombarding everyone with links. It was like links, you know. So and then after a while it kind of slowed, you know, it eventually slowed down because it became very exhausting, like trying to take on all this information at once. And I mean, I still take on a lot of information for the report, but I'm still not doing it to the level that I was as well. It was almost like a real kind of download, you know, but a literal download where you're doing it yourself. But one of the things that we'd like always say, there'd be the few times that I'd say to people are like, what do you think it is? It's like, where is the chink in the programming that like some people that you would, like you say, you would have thought that would have been like, oh my God, no way. You know, like it was just an obvious no way. And yet they'd gone whole steam ahead and they were like kind of against you for not seeing it, and all of that stuff came out. And then the people that you would think were really sucked into the narrative or just seemed to spend their time really on the mainstream, something kind of clicked really. And I think what it showed was that the mask that we wear, or the kind of the pretense that we had in society, fell away. And whoever people were pretending to be, that didn't really wash anymore if you wanted the truth, you know. It like, and so especially when the people who pretend to be analytical and questioning and intelligent and all that kind of stuff, and then you try and have a conversation with them as well. I remember trying to have just kind of like putting my view across with regards to the vaccine as well, because I was looking for a place to live at the time, and it was just like impossible to get an appointment, or because it was like put down as like, unless you've got all of this, then you're not even welcome through the door. And then there was one place that I'd managed to really get on with her, and you know, the criteria was all right, and then in the end she just said no, because you haven't had it. And you know, and you're just like, wow. But we'd been there and we'd spoken, I think, of all the times that I'd gone to visit different like apartments and places, I'd stayed there for hours. I've been there for like 3 or 4 hours and a couple of cups of tea and talking, and then at the end of it, it's like, no, sorry, you can't come in, you know. And so I mean, I was disappointed in that I really was desperate to kind of get somewhere to live, you know, like kind of start a base, because the past couple of years during the lockdowns, I kind of stayed in places that were temporary and kind of below, because I wasn't earning as much. So it just made sense to kind of like compromise on my living space as well financially. And I just were like, okay, we're moving out of it now. But it was just seeing someone's fear. But even when I'd said to them, well, you know, and I didn't really go into the whole reason for it, I just kind of came at it from well, you know, it just came out a bit too soon. And, you know, as historically, especially in the Black community, we're just a bit suspicious about, you know, drugs and tests and things like that, because, you know, they've been used as human experiments over history. So we're just not going to jump for another one, you know. But it was like everything that I'd said, it was like, well, you know, they've had this, she came up with something that sounded plausible, but you knew it was like absolute rubbish. But the way that it was presented And I don't know where that information came from, but it was like, no, well, you know, they've had this on the side for ages, and you know, they were ready to roll with the, you know, it didn't make any sense, but it sounded very good. And that's the thing, it was like sense went out the window. It just needed to be presented in a way that sounded official and sounded reasonable. And it's, you know, it felt reasonable, but you're like, that's not really true, you know. It was, there was so trying to bring common sense into the situation never stood up. I was trying to say to someone else as well, I'm like, okay, let's look at it from a logistical point of view. Like, you know, where did all these masks come from? Like, you know, like overnight they were in every shop. Overnight we had plastic everywhere, like decals and signs and all the rest of it. Just overnight they just like bam, it turned out over the blue. Like, if you know anything about manufacturing, or you don't even have to know that much about it, it's just, there is not possible to be able to have millions and millions of those items available like that, just overnight on a whim. You know, you've got to kind of create these things, you've got to store them, there's a lot that goes on into it, and they just couldn't. It was like, well, no, and you know, they had them in the stores, and like, not to this level. There's no way that like practically every person had a bag of 10 masks, you know, like overnight. You don't have that ability to furnish that amount of product without having a lead time of months, if not years, to get it manufactured and get it shipped over. Just look at it from a logical point of view, but logic had gone out the window because of fear.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And how would you think, are you doing anything different in your life? Like, do you have a different lifestyle that came through this whole time?
I would say I'm definitely more rooted in myself now, trusting myself like even more than I ever did before, because like it's just kind of it's always worked out. And especially just recently, when I'm kind of looking at things to do, or I'm really just kind of like tapping into trusting myself, because also I've seen how I think what it was that kind of made a lot of people not really get in touch with, not really see the illusion for what it was, is because there's a disconnect. So for me, it's like 100%, 110% important to maintain that connection with like God, spirit, like whatever you want to call it. It's like integral to everything that I do, because it's like the only guidance that I've got. And then just really just like leaning into the things that I know that I have the talents for. You know, all those years in the studio like taught me how to use technology, which means I can then do a podcast, you know, from like my laptop and speak to people from all over the world. So and then just other ways that I can use my voice and other ideas that I have, and just kind of really write down what my skills are and how I'm going to be able to turn them into ways to be able to support me outside of having to really go back and do anything near what I used to do. I mean, I like now and again I'll kind of do maybe like the odd weekend, and I really notice the difference in being in that space, because I'm just seeing the difference in where people are in terms of themselves spiritually, really, and the questioning and the healing that they're doing. And this time has really kind of agitated people and brought up a lot of their stuff that they haven't dealt with. And it's really making people act out in a way that seems quite childish. So there's a lot of that still happening, you know, and the ability to be able to discern and not be fooled, I think is more important than ever if you see it. And be able to kind of really trust your own voice. I think out of that is just, that's the way that I've grown more than ever, is to really trust my own voice, like internally and externally as well.
Yeah. I think that's something you need to practice like every day, because it's so or it can be so hard, I think, to even realize, hey, what is my own voice? Actually, there are so many thoughts in my head. So which thought do I listen to? Is my voice even my thought? Where does my voice come from? I think that's a work people need to learn to do, I think. What you say is a good way to actually find that voice?
For me, it's just listening. Like my like as a songwriter, I always used to just hearing stuff, and like and being able to like capture it, so I always try and like write in my journal or write in my notes, or a lot of them are becoming like solo episodes, so I'm writing there. Or sometimes I'll just listen and just like listen to what I'm being shown. And that's something that I really need to move into trusting even more so, because sometimes I'll get into a situation or meet someone, and like you say, they're so nice, their outward push is so nice, and the majority of people will be like, oh my god, that person's really nice. And what I'm seeing is, I'm not necessarily seeing that they're not nice, but I'm seeing that this nice is not who they are. And it's not that they're necessarily evil, it's just that they are coming from a different place and they're not a stable and a strong person. It's the only way that you can do it is trust it. I would say we've all had occasions over our years where we've had a gut feeling or an instinct about something and we didn't go down that path, and then however much longer later you realize. And if you recall those moments when you knew that you knew something yet you didn't follow it, just realize that you're always being told what the truth of the situation is. It's whether you choose to go along with it as well. And sometimes just writing, journaling, sometimes just writing a list of all the things that you can do. I think we don't really give ourselves credit personally for what we're capable of, and just literally write down all the stuff that you can do, because there's always things that you can do that other people would give, spend money on to learn. You only have to go to YouTube and tap in anything, there's a channel about anything, so there's always somebody that wants to know what your skills are. And I think if we individually start to remember that we have got personal skills, and to somebody we're an expert, and it's just kind of fostering that, and just having in mind, for me as well, as having in mind the person that I want to be, or the version of myself I want to kind of speak in the world, and being more true to that. And it's not an easy thing to do, because you will trigger a lot of people, especially if you're moving in a space and growing and they are not growing for one reason or another. A lot of the time it's, they're used to their comfort zone, even if it's not that comfortable. And then when you're seeing other people move forward, if you're comfortable in yourself, then you'll want to know how they do it. You want to have a conversation with them, or you'll just be happy for them. If you're not, then things like jealousy and you want to kind of sabotage them will come in as well. And that's really about, you like just listening to your own emotions, really. And if you kind of get triggered about something, or if there is something that you can't let go of, or you keep replaying in your mind a situation or something someone said to you, maybe just kind of think and sit with that, and like, why can't I let go of that situation? Why did that person wind me up so much? What is it about myself that is getting kind of jarred by that thing? And just really go into it and try and work out where it comes from. For me, it's just a lot of self-inquiry and really questioning things as they come up. If I'm having discomfort around somebody, or if I just can't, if I've got some like kind of, that feeling of like, where you want to almost kind of like have revenge on somebody, or you feel that they owe you an apology or something like that. For the most part, I mean, the thing is, like most conspiracy theorists, we're never going to get an apology in our lifetime, so let that go. For me, it's just about listening on all times, and it can be just lying and being quiet. It can be going for a walk, or sometimes it's just listening to nice music and just being in the moment and appreciating someone else's art, and then reminding myself that I can do that too, you know, and also having a discipline in giving yourself the respect to have a goal and then work towards it, because too often we say we want to do something and we don't. But, you know, just like take a baby step every day so that you can congratulate yourself afterwards and go, okay, I did something, I completed something, and it's not just something that you talk about.
Yeah, I think on your YouTube channel you also have, what is it, guided meditation?
Yeah, so this is a project that I'm working on that will be launched soon through Great Awakening Report. And it's a combination, so it's breath work, guided meditation with solfeggio frequencies underneath as well. So there's like the different solfeggio frequencies will actually work on kind of healing different aspects of the body as well. So it's chunked into different, working on health, working on emotions, working on relationships, working on abundance, working on purpose, working on awakening, working on expansion. I think I've got them all there as well. So, and then what it will be is like each month as it gets launched, there will be a new practice for each one of those aspects that you can work on, and then it will just you just kind of keep working through. You either choose one and kind of focus on that, or move through each practice. But that has been something that's really I'm really excited to do, because it's kind of brought me back into the sphere of music and creation as well. And then also really kind of combining and trying to make something that is a new offering that's actually going to really help people. So that's where I'm using my skills to actually help, as opposed to like I'm going to be the most famous thing. And it just and it feels so much better. So I put one out already that's kind of available, and then kind of the bigger programs due to come out in a few weeks, and that's just a dark to light meditation, and it's just speaking to, there's so much information and so much truth coming out that, you know, if you're aware of it, so if you're more what you would call awake, you can get overwhelmed sometimes by the level of information that kind of reveals the world, and it can feel very heavy. And then also it can feel really hard to watch people that you've known all your life and then realize that there's a disconnect. You don't know them, and you can see that the choices that they're making are potentially going to harm them. You know, it's like watching someone roll off a cliff really slowly, and they won't stop you. It's traumatic for you more so than them, because they think that they're okay, but you're kind of watching this slow moving potential catastrophe, and it's hard for you to kind of stay in your heart and be okay with that and stay with the light. So that's what that meditation is about, the dark to light meditation.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Did I want to say? Yeah, I also have the impression that those past 2 years, they challenged people, or that it's still going on. It's a challenge for everyone to face themselves, even so-called awakened people. I'm always very careful with the term. That the energies are getting so intense, and we are forced to see things that that we didn't know about ourselves, or that we didn't want to see.
Yeah, it does really bring some stuff up. Like I said, that's the experience that I've had with myself. I mean, I had earlier this year, January, February time, I think it was like some retrograde stuff. I'm not an astrologist, but you know, that I think was a real kind of delving into some healing, because there'd been so much movement and moving around, and then I'd finally gotten out of town and found somewhere that I was happy with, that I didn't have to pretend that I'd had certain things, you know. It was just like, it was peaceful, and it just took me a couple of months to be like, okay, I'm still now. And then once I was still, then all of the stuff that I've been kind of like pushing aside just to kind of get through all of this crazy 2 years then I had to kind of really deal with. And it was a lot of facing things that I had not really looked at on a deep level, and also facing truths about situations that I'd been in, and being honest about how hurt I'd been about situations, because I'm very much one of like, yeah, all right, it's all right, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But there was a level where it's like, actually it wasn't fine, that you were done badly, and there's nothing wrong in taking time to acknowledge that you got really hurt by a situation, so that you can kind of like really grieve the pain of that and then move forward. And I think that's an opportunity for all of us, and the people that I'm really connecting with and the people that I'm making new friendships with are all on a similar kind of path, and the ones that are not dealing with those things and are being led more and more into just more illusion. Like, you know, this week, over the past, we're kind of a couple of days away from the big funeral in the UK, and you have to just really focus on staying out of, there's a real you can see there's just a real spell that's pulling people in to something, and even to the extent where this looks even more nefarious than before, you know, with the masks and the COVID and everything like that, because this just out and out looks like a loose fest where you know, people are queuing for hours, like a day and a half even, just to walk past and it's or they're grieving or crying over someone that they didn't know. And I think what's been difficult or challenging for a lot of us who are in what we call the truth community, or more awake, or really know the story, is especially knowing the truth or truths about the situation of the figures in that family, and then seeing people still worship them and give them, you know, they're nice, you know, this whole thing about they're nice people. And it's like, you know, you don't have to go digging on the dark web to find out what we're talking about. Like, these are not like undercover conspiracies now, you know, it's been out there literally in front of our faces, what has been going on and the connections. And it's just difficult to then see people just kind of cry tears over over an idea of people that they don't know, when they probably don't cry for themselves and deal with their own trauma, or even have shed tears for people within their own family. So that again is like another thing that's hard to see. And here in the UK, you can't walk, and you know, I try to stay as much away from the shops as possible, but you can't walk into a shop without there being a picture and tribute. Wow. You can't open an app, literally you can't open a website like eBay, Apple, Amazon, like any kind of big website that I've tried to go on, there's like, you just can't escape it. It's everywhere. And I'm not even in London, so I don't even know the level that they're just going to be like pouring it on thick there. Yeah. So but the pinnacle of it is on Monday, where they've literally shut everything down. Yeah, everything is closed. People have got days off work. It's just like, you know, and that's the frustration as well, because, you know, there's this talk about we're going into a cost of living crisis, like the energy bills are going to go up over the next 6 months, and then again, where people are going to have to really make decisions about whether they eat or whether they turn the heating on over this winter. And yet millions of pounds are being spent on this situation, you know, and the people that are going to in a few months' time kind of really be counting the pennies are there, giving their energy to this and giving their emotions to this, when their concern really should be, how are they going to be sufficient and get through the winter, you know, because it's going to be challenging for a lot of people. But it's hard to see that people are not kind of really concerned about the reality of their own situation and are getting led by what they're being told they should be sorry about. You know, that we're being told that we are a nation in mourning. We are mourning. Like, not everybody is actually. You know, like some of us are just pulled back from it. We're not sad. We're a little bit frustrated that we're seeing people still getting, you know, hypnotized by the media and the stories and the music and the drama that we're told about. It's literally like it is theatre on steroids actually at the moment. It's unbelievable to witness. It's like, I mean, who knows, like, what can top this one? It's going to be the performance of a week.
I'm for 2 years now. I think, okay, but this thing now is so obvious. Now people will get it, and then another thing happens, and another thing, and I'm just sitting meaning, okay, what else will come? What else will they tell people, and they will believe everything?
That's the shocking thing, like you say, people who you consider to be intelligent are, there's so many crazy things. There was a drawing done of the Queen with Paddington Bear, you know, the fictional bear character. And then now we're hearing that people are leaving marmalade sandwiches on their doorstep as a tribute. This is what is going on, you know? Or people that there was someone had screenshotted a conversation between them and someone that was meant to deliver something to them, was working for them, and they were saying, oh, they just have been so sad, they haven't been able to stop crying, and they can't even handle any money, because every time they look at the money, obviously there's, you know, an image of her there, and they're getting re-triggered. You know, we thought it couldn't be any crazier, but here we are. And like, I kid you not, and you're just like, now you're just rubbing the sides of your head going like, but how much worse can it be? It's just that, and so many things are being played out. It's like to the point where you're thinking, is it a movie? Because they're not only just they are showing kind of like things that are happening that aren't so nice, really. There's like a clip of Andrew kind of doing something weird with his hand over his daughter, and people, either they didn't see it or they chose not to see it. There's been clips of the new king just being really quite rude and belligerent about things on camera, and that's kind of gone around, and yet people are making excuses. You know, well, you know, he's allowed to be rude to people because, you know, his mum's just died. No, because, you know, I, like, my mum passed a few years ago. I hope I wasn't rude to someone as an excuse that I was grieving. Grieving isn't an excuse to be rude. It isn't at all. You know, if anything, you just want to keep the peace and everything. You don't want to go out there kicking and screaming and being so rude to everyone. So people are seeing it, but they're still defending the bad behavior. And that's a real trauma response there.
Or also there's a clip where a naked kid is climbing out of the Buckingham Palace. I don't know if you
I've
you know
seen
that clip.
one.
And it's many years old, and yet you know, it's I don't know.
Well, people don't want to hear it. I mean, even when it's been spoken about, like, you know, well, look who they were company with. Look, you know, like one of the most prolific pedophiles on record ever. They were friends for years and years and years, and then people going, well, he didn't know. He didn't know. I'm like, listen. Anybody that's going to go anywhere near that family, they go into your history, they work out, they know everything about you. They know what underwear you wear on a given day. They know everything about your family. They know stuff you've forgotten about yourself. So that it's not possible for just some person with this really dark side to them to just be around them and nobody know. You know, oh God, you know, like, no, he didn't know, he just couldn't tell, he wasn't. No, We have to start like facing the truth. And I think it's either people honestly don't believe it, at this point you can't keep saying no to stuff when it's in your face. This, like I said, this isn't like a hidden secret now. This is out there. And yet you don't want to see the truth. So I don't know. I wonder where things go. Like, will people ever really kind of like have that moment where they're like, oh my, like they like pop out of the pod and realize and gasp for air? But I think we're getting to the point now where that's probably not going to happen. I know that, I've respectfully stopped trying to send links to people who don't want them, and just really focus on getting like mentally and spiritually stronger, because I think we just need to I think there's still like a good couple of years of some more crazy, and the crazy is going to get harder to live with, because it's not just going to be something out there. It's a bit closer. It's like you're going to see your money go down. It's going to be cold. You're going to go to the shop. There's not going to be as much food there, and these are things that we've never really encountered in the majority of our lifetimes, in the majority of people that are alive, especially in the UK today. We've never experienced that. It's stuff that happened in the war, or it happens in different countries, but now it's going to be on our doorstep. And as prices go up and you have to kind of make decisions, and even people who've got money aside, when you realize there is a deliberate attempt to literally take everything from you until you go begging, and the option is just like permanent enslavement, and it's going to look like a great deal when you're just kind of like, sign away everything and I'll just have, a certain amount as long as I just toe the line for the rest of my life. It's like, you're not really going to want to do that. But there are people who, unless they do kind of really see what's happening, will be pulled into a system that once they're in, there's no way out.
What do you think can we do for ourselves, but also for other people who actually want to change something, but they don't know how?
Man, I wish I knew, but I think the most we can do is like kind of really work on processing the information that we learn, just like if it hurts, it hurts. If it angers us, it angers us. Be kind of selfish to an extent in your own practice, in your own knowledge. Have a practice of meditation, of prayer, of also forgiveness as well, is one thing that Mark is always telling me about, and it's so true though, and it's forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of what other people have done. And then when you really start to get really rooted in clearing all of this stuff, because like it just seems like the more you do, the more comes up, the more you do, the more comes up, but you do feel better and you grow, and then also try and connect as best you can with people who are on the same wavelength as you. And you don't have to expect everyone to agree with you 100%. There's always going to be bits where you're sitting on either side of like a point, but when you're around people who've done a lot of work, there's a more ease in disagreeing. Whereas in the older way of doing things, it was like if you disagreed with someone, because people didn't have a sense of who they were, their opinions were their personality. So if you agreed with them, they took it personally, and you're like, this is not personal, I just don't agree with what you're saying. Completely different things, so I think it's kind of working on ourselves, connecting with people who see us for who we are and allow us to be who we are, and work on finding ways to build outside of the system, I think, to the best of our abilities, whatever that looks like, and being as self-sufficient as possible outside of the system, because we just don't know to what level it is going to go down really at this point. Like we can have like power outages and internet outages are we going to lose water? Are we going to, we don't know to what level. So if all of the things that you take for granted went, how long would you be able to survive with what you've got?
Right. Yeah, that's what I've been telling people too, to get prepared. Even before all of that started, I was already in prophecies and everything. Because already as a kid, I kept wondering, hey, okay, so there were two wars in this. Well, so I grew up in Germany, so there were two wars, or two huge wars, two world wars in this country. Why shouldn't there be more? Why should it stop now? So I always had a feeling of it's just logical that things happen, whether that is a war or any other form of big crisis. It's just logical that as long as we're not all in real world peace, of course things will happen sooner or later, whether that is in my generation or the next one. I see you frozen. Where do I see you frozen? Yeah, so we're back from these interruptions. And whatever happened, we're not too sure. But we were talking about what we can do for the world and for ourselves, or in general for the situation. And yeah, I've been saying that I've been telling for years to the people, hey, just become self-sufficient. If you can, try to live off-grid, or at least, well, do whatever you can. I kind of believe that that when you do what you can and trust that things will be all right. So if someone doesn't have $1 million to invest into an off-grid project, well, you don't necessarily need that much, but the point stands that if you don't have a fortune to invest into an off-grid project, just do what you can. And whether that is stocking up in your own home with practical things, not just food, also practical things like solar or other energy generators, or knowledge is also really good to have. Also knowledge about plants that grow outside, herbs and so-called weeds that are actually healing tools, like dandelion and lots of other things. And I think that knowledge also, well, it didn't get lost, but it's not common anymore. What our grandmothers used to know and these things. But yeah, people I think need to get together, and as you said, like find people on the same wavelength, and just build something together, and trust and believe that that this is going to work out.
And I think there's more there's just more richness in that. I like one of my little pastimes, and when I'm kind of like deciding I'm not working anymore, I like watching people on YouTube that are living off grid. There's so many different like off gridders, or people who live in tiny homes, or people who just live in a van and travel around. And I know those things aren't easy, you haven't got the creature comforts, you haven't necessarily got the space, but the way that we've been living has kept us, like you said, away from just the knowledge of what's around us. And so many things that we walk past and look at, and we think they're weeds and they're poisonous and all, is just so not true. And we can live on so much less than we do. And one of the things that I've done over the years, and partly it was for a health thing, but also just because I think for me it really helps me spiritually as well, is to fast, to eat much less than I ever used to. And I remember my mom always used to fast and pray, you know, especially on the Sunday. She'd have this kind of not eating until like she'd gone to church and come back, and then she'd eat. Whereas for the most part, it's inconceivable that you wouldn't have breakfast, you know. And there's this, everyone's like, it's the most important meal of the day. It's like everyone says literally word for word what it is, and it's like, actually it's not, you know. you can go for days without food, and it kind of puts you in connection with your body in a way that you don't realize that you've been so separated from it because of all of these like unnatural foodstuffs that we've been ingesting in our body that have made us so sick and so disconnected from our body. So another thing that you can do is just kind of pull back on how much you put in your body, and you'll be so surprised at how, after you've got over the thing of like, oh my, like the immediate thing is like, if you don't eat, you think you're going to die. It's like you won't die. You know, you can go like you can go like months without food, water not so much, but you can go for a very long time without having to ingest. And the body is just so amazing in that, one, it will start to repair itself, but also it will open up like more channels for you in terms of like connection. You do become more sensitive to energy. You do become more sensitive then when you do eat something that is really not in alignment. You feel it instantly, and you really start to calibrate what you want to put in your body on all levels. And over the years, I've just moved away from like products where I used to be as big chain of chemists in the UK called Boots, and I used to be into there all the time buying the smelly things and the scrubby things and the colored things. And now I'm just really about like natural things. My friend goes backwards and forwards to Ghana, and she knows to always bring me like a load of like neem oil and things like that, and just natural soaps, because those things are they're going into our bodies. You know, all these things that we use to beautify ourselves are a lot of the time really poisonous. And it's just going back to the earth and natural oils and like I used to have so much fun making all of these things. And I've got like a pot of shea butter and cocoa butter and coconut oil that over the week or so I'm just going to get the blender out and make lots of like nice moisturizers for the winter as well. So, and it just becomes more fun to actually then be in like creating everything that you put into your body, so that you don't feel that you have to go into a big shiny shop with a big advertisement telling you like what this thing's going to do to you, when the last thing that it's going to do to you is anything good. It's just like full of more chemicals and more poisons. And that's another thing as well, is to kind of just simplify your life, really, to the extent of just make it really basic, but it becomes so much richer when you actually take away all the things that you think are going to give you that boost. I really do enjoy watching people just who've like kind of really like pared their lives down to like the bare minimum, and then they start to build up again. You know, if they root somewhere, then they start to plant their own seeds and grow their own gardens, or even build their own houses from literally like a space where they're pouring the concrete, putting the sticks and everything and building it. And it takes time and they make mistakes, but then there's like a peace and a joy and about what they've created. And it just seems like just a more in tune with a different way of life. And it just seems like more people want that. You know, I know I'm looking at that, and I don't know what that means for me long term, but it's just like that. I always appreciate seeing people just kind of reducing the clutter and the excess out of their lives, because there's rarely have I heard anyone who's regretted it. You know, they talk about so many big things that that once they used to have cars and full-time jobs and like were how high powered, and it's all come down to, no, I'm just sitting here with my hands in the mud and I'm just like happy as ever.
Yeah, but it seems to me that also humanity is kind of challenged now to actually do that, to come back to the roots and back to nature, and to working together. Yeah, at least the part that wants to. The other part, I think, goes direction more division, more wars. So I think humanity, and each one of us needs to make a decision where they want to go. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're at the end of this show.
It's been great.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun until the weird interruption, but it was only for a short time.
Yeah.
But sorry for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
It's been great.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope we can talk again.
Absolutely.
And I hope everyone out there had as much fun as I did and as Carol did.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was it for the Colors of the Universe. See you next time.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Colors of the Universe here at Studio 3 on Ascension Radio. If you enjoy what we're doing, please send a donation via the PayPal button on radio.mpeg.org. Find more amazing content and updates on our Facebook page. And now, just be your colorful self and enjoy your day.